Hi, welcome to today's math video, which is going to be on fractions. I appreciate your spending time together with me, and if you find this video to be helpful, I hope you'll think of someone with whom you can share it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I hope that today you will. Subscribing simply means that you have chosen to be a part of our little learning community. Fractions. Scary to many, frightening to many. If you speak with any elementary teacher or elementary student and ask them the area in math which they most struggle, you will likely hear one of these three things: word problems, long division, and fractions. Perhaps you've seen this quote or maybe on a t-shirt. 3 out of 2 people struggle with fractions. Many students never master fractions. In a study of 6th and 8th grade students with both like and unlike denominators, questions were asked of them adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, and they only got the answers correct 50% of the time. We know that 5th grade understanding of fractions is a great predictor of how students will succeed in algebra and overall math achievement in high school. We also know that fraction understanding is foundational to many more advanced areas of mathematics and science. And yet, 1,000 high school algebra teachers in the U.S. rated as poor their students' knowledge of fractions and rated fractions as the second greatest impediment to their students mastering algebra, second only to, can you guess? Second only to word problems. And fractions are everywhere in all areas of work. In a recent survey of 2,300 white-collar, blue-collar, and service workers, more than 2/3, there are fractions again, 2/3 indicated that they use fractions in their work. Just last night, my daughter Annie ran into me. She was cooking to ask a fraction question. And if I hadn't been on the elliptical and not wanting to get off and break that whole pattern of what I was doing, I would have jumped up and gotten my models to show her my little fraction models. I'll do that later today when I see her, so it can hopefully maybe compress that concept for her. When we consider the impact that fraction knowledge has on future learning, it's humbling. What we do is important, and how we do it matters. If you were to ask me what curriculum I'm using to teach fractions to my 4th graders, I would have to simply hold up our bars. This is how we are spending every day. It's been over 3 weeks now, and every day we are using these manipulatives for fractions. I bought 6 sets like this, and then I inherited enough so that every one of my students has a set, but they're not like this. They're also like this in a baggie, which is a little challenging. I called the company and asked if I could just buy the plastic frames, and they said no, of course. I'm trying to figure out what I can make so that I can stick those models into a frame-like thing like this, because it makes it so much easier for them to start out with them already organized in order. That's 51 pieces that they have to organize and sort out before we can actually begin our fraction work. But it's worth it. And if I didn't have these sets, if all I had was the 6 sets, I would still teach it this way, but in rotating groups so that everyone would have their hands on them. And if purchasing these is out of the question for you, you can even go on Teachers Pay Teachers and purchase just paper samples like this and cut them out and have the students color them, because they really, really do need to experience the fractions. When they experience the fractions, it becomes very clear to them when you're doing things like even adding fractions that 1/3 plus 1/3 cannot possibly equal 2/6. It becomes very clear. But you have to be careful that you make sure that your students know that these are not the only fractions on earth. You know, when I'm circulating in my classroom, I'm always reminded that that is where I belong, not at my desk doing my own work. The other day, we were doing inequalities where I had the students pulling out fractions and comparing 2/3. Is it greater or less than 4/5? And, you know, we weren't even using paper worksheets on that day. We were just using the manipulatives. And I came across one group, and this is the conversation I heard. But 1/7 isn't a fraction. And Zara said, what do you mean 1/7 isn't a fraction? Well, it's not on this. It's not, see, there are no sevenths here. And I was so thankful that I had happened upon that group at that very moment, because I was able to explain that, yes, while I don't know why they chose not to put sevenths on here, sevenths are most definitely a fraction. And fractions are everywhere, in your pockets, in your money. Pennies are fractions. And so please make sure that you let your students know that these are not the only fractions that exist. And if you're using circle fractions, the same, make sure they know that fractions are everywhere. We've used our book some. I'm always pulling problems from the book, but it's only really been a few times over these chapters of fractions that we have done an entire page from the book. I find that the knowledge that they receive is so much deeper and so much richer when they're using manipulatives. And I have to be in a place where I'm okay with that. Now, we know that we have parents who think that multiple worksheet pages, things registered on the grade book, are the equivalent of math understanding. And if you are in that place where you have parents questioning, that's the time not to succumb to more workbook pages, but to educate your parents and let them know and assure them that very deep math work is going on, and it very often does not have to be on a math page. Something really special happened several days ago during math. We were working with our manipulatives. I was modeling up front, and the students all had their sets at their desks, when Madeline approached with a Post-it and set it down right where I was teaching. And the Post-it said this: I understand fractions now, thank you. Huge paycheck. I was just overcome and so thankful that she was willing to express that she now understands something that had been challenging for her in the past. Let me show you what we've been working on the last couple days in math. We've been learning the terms proper fractions, improper fractions, and equal one fractions. And so we've been playing this game by the Boxcar and One-Eyed Jack people, Jane and John Felling, from their book called Math Shakers. And let me show you what a math shaker is. It's simply a repurposed pillbox. So if you don't want to buy their sets of shakers, you can just go to the dollar store and get pillboxes there. I would get the largest ones that you can find. This is what theirs look like, and they come in sets of 12 for $20. You do have to buy the dice separately, and you want to make sure you have dice that are two different colors just to make it easier for them to read the fractions. And they can even be the black and white dice. They set up the games to be played rather collectively. The teacher gives the command shake, and then the teacher gives the command stop, and that way the ruckus factor is reduced. But I knew that my students, if I taught them well, they would be able to do it on their own. So I trained them that the purpose is not to try to bust these open. And if they do pop open, it's very easy to put the dice back in and shut them up. But it didn't happen. They did very well. I trained them. These are not musical instruments to dance with. You're not supposed to shake them by someone's ear or face. So I just really had them practice that routine. And during our game, I didn't have to reteach or discipline one single student. So you simply shake, and then they stop, and then they line them up like this, and then they can see what the fractions are. So let me show you the sheet that each student will need to play this game. And you will also have to put your students in groups of 2 and 3. Here's the sheet. And once you have shaken your fractions and lined them up, you're going to record them in this little sheet right here, one round will be recorded just like that. And each player is assigned a different role. For example, I might be assigned the role, I'm looking for proper fractions, my friend is looking for improper fractions, and if there's a third person, that person can be looking for fractions that equal 1. This is what it looks like when it's filled out. And then you teach the students to make a key. You can say maybe proper fractions, you put a diamond around, improper fractions, maybe you circle, and fractions that equal 1, you can put a square around. And then for each round, you count up how many points you have. Like I would say how many times were there improper fractions or proper fractions based on my role, and I record how many points I get. Then you reshake for a second round right here, and then you reshake for a third round, and then you add up to see how many points each person has. The person with the most points wins that set, and then you start again. And you, at each round, you switch roles. So if I'm improper on this round, then I would be proper on this round, and then I would be equals 1 on this round. The second day that we played this game, I didn't have time to go up to the copy machine to make new sets of papers, and so I told the students, I really want to play. Do you think you'll be okay without those papers? And they said unanimously, we'll be fine. And they were. Look, they made their own sheets, and they even left space between the sets. And Matthew said to me at the end, that was fun. And it really was fun. One variation for this game is to then have your students put the fractions on a number line after each round. When we finished our game, Brandon said, Mrs. Matsuda, I think we should really change the name. I said, to what, Brandon? He said, shake and make, because we're shaking and then we're making fractions. If you're a teacher that struggles with fractions yourself, I hope that if you haven't already done so, that you will share your struggle with your students. I think far more important than showing up with all the answers and looking like we know everything is for us to be authentic with our students and show them what we do when we get stuck and that we struggle too. And that is a far greater gift that we can give to our students. We recently, just 2 weeks ago, had our standardized tests. It's a new test. This is only the second time we're giving it. And I wondered how my students would do. You know, this is my first time in 4th grade in a very long time. In my heart, I know that they're loving math, they're learning, but it sure was validating to see that they are learning on paper. They did very, very well. I'm most thankful. But the real reward came just on Friday when I was working with a small group of students on a problem that 6th graders, I remember, struggle with a lot. We've been adding and subtracting fractions. How have we been adding and subtracting fractions? With our manipulatives, I've put them in groups of 2s and 3s, and that's a lot of pieces of manipulatives. That's 51 pieces times the number of students in my class. That's a lot of stuff, but it makes a mess, but it's worth it to me because I simply told them, my dears, I want to ask you a question that I haven't taught you, but I just want to see what you will say about this problem. I hadn't taught it, but evidently I had been teaching it all along with the manipulatives. This one. Madeline raised her hand, and I said, Madeline, you think you know the answer to this? It's 2/3. I said, how did you know? She said, I get it. I understand. Get it. I almost burst into tears because that was an incredible moment. What we teach is important, and how we teach matters. And if you are lying in bed at night wondering, am I doing enough? Is what I'm doing really what they need? I want to remind you that it is. Because you are a math person, and you, as you are enough. Goodbye.